Well, here we are with the 1787 Broadwood Square. Broadwood had been making pianos for roughly 7 years at this point. And between 1780 and 1791, the pianos were all roughly the same model, so they're the same size. There are always minor variations with these early pianos. One thing we'll notice in the back are some instructions on how to change the regulation and the damper relief, both in English and in French, because Broadwood was exporting these pianos not only to America, but of course to the continent. And these pianos were very, very popular. Broadwood was the first person to think about continuing to ramp up so that he could meet all the demand. And so he became one of the premier piano manufacturers in the 18th and then 19th century. There are many, many Broadwoods around, not as many from the very early period, and few as nice and original as this one. This one was in the south of England all of its life until it came to America about 3 years ago. And so we're happy to have this piano. We're going to show you some details in just a moment, but just briefly, you can hear the difference in the sound. Broadwood was very much interested in a drier, crisper sound, more like what the harpsichord produced. He was, of course, along with Kirkman, the major producer of harpsichords in England. And so we have a piano now that, rather than having that sort of a singing quality, is a much drier sort of event. And now we're inside the piano, and what you're able to see are the strings running obliquely along the side of the case, and then the little brass underdampers will actuate. As I push the key down, the back of the damper tail is lifted, and so the little red head will move away. You'll also notice that when the hammerheads come up, they come up and they rather stay in place. And with Broadwood, we're able to bring the hammerheads actually very close to the string. And so this allows the Broadwood to have the greatest range of pianissimo and forte of all the pianos at the time. They accomplished this with a very interesting little trick. The little push rod that pushes up the hammer has just a bit of flannel under the leather that covers the top. And that flannel is just good enough to keep the hammer from vibrating and then bouncing against the string 2 or 3 times, which gives an ugly clash. After Broadwood, the square piano would continue to grow, starting with the 5-octave compass that Zumpe had established to begin with. It would grow to 5½ octaves in 1794, and then roughly 6 octaves by 1804. And by the middle of the 1820s, 6-octave pianos were very, very common. In order to achieve additional tone, the thickness of the strings was increased. As the strings would be increased, then the rigidity of the case had to be beefed up because the piano was under more and more tension, until we would ultimately get to the very, very large American square pianos that you'll sometimes see in antique stores. What we have in front of us right now is a piano that's roughly contemporary with the one that Patrick has been playing. This one is a sort of a special piano. It's called a unichord. It was made for areas in the country where piano tuners would be hard to find, and where a piano was expected to stay in tune for more than a year at a time. It was very successful for a short period of time, particularly in the South, and then larger instruments caught up with it and would ultimately eclipse it. But we can get an idea of the sound of one of these early unichord pianos. So it makes a beautiful, sort of haunting little sound, very, very appropriate for the size house that it was in. And these pianos had been bought from England and brought into America, you know, pretty much until about 1828. We passed a tariff that made bringing in pianos very, very expensive. And the American piano industry took off like a bang and never looked back. By the 1860s, the square piano was in steep decline in Europe, and by 1865, the square piano has essentially gone away, whereas in America, the square piano was actually reaching its heyday. We would continue to make square pianos well into the 1890s, and in fact, the last square piano was made in 1905. It was retired for approximately 30 years, and then Mathushik, in a spirit of nostalgia and bringing back past to America, actually came out with a small square piano that they advertised and sold relatively well for the next 5 years. It being the Depression era, demand for all instruments was lower, and so ultimately it disappeared. And that would be the last square piano that would ever be made. So the square piano, got its start in 1766, would ultimately end by about 1940, but are certainly enjoyable instruments to bring back to life. And I have really enjoyed bringing this one back for Patrick. I hope you'll enjoy it too, and I thank you very much.